Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Hi guys, and welcome to a new episode on this channel. Today we will be talking about Thomas Paine's Common Sense. So let's get started. Before we can talk more about common sense, we have to know what it is, and to know its impact, we also need to know what it is. So let's get on with it. And we're outside today, so that's a bonus. Alright, Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Okay, Common Sense is not a book, at least not originally. It is a pamphlet, and that pamphlet is part of the American Revolution. So what does that really have to do with it? I mean, you know, common sense, you've heard about it during history class. And, well, it was first published on January of 1776 by a guy named Thomas Paine. And why did he write this? I'll explain later. But this is about revolutions in general, and it wanted to upstart a revolution. Who I am talking about is actually Paine here. He wanted to upstart a revolution, and it kind of worked. I don't really know what to say, but if it did, it certainly contributed to fire up the sparks and eventually the fire of the revolution. And during the American Revolution, this was the mostly read pamphlet of all time. And as Thomas Jefferson said, quote, "No writer has exceeded Paine in ease and familiarity of style, in perspicuity of expression, happiness of elocution, and in simple, unassuming language." And end quote. That is from Thomas Jefferson himself. He was one of the founding fathers of the United States of America, by the way, so that's kind of a big compliment for going into Paine's case. So, what about Thomas Paine? I don't really know much about him. I didn't research about it. I just finished the book. But in the beginning, this Bantam classic version of it has a introduction by Dana Gabaldon. And Dana Gabaldon says that she just talks a bit about the common sense and Thomas Paine in general and what he was like, how he was when he was doing it. Like, in fact, this book just explains all the governments. In fact, it just talks about monarchies, anarchies, the British in general too, that the British were they weren't allowing American rights, the 13 colonies' rights back then. And so, yeah, just like that. Why did Thomas Paine take this risk? So, I'll explain right now. In the introduction by Diana Gabaldon, it is said that Thomas Paine at the time was sacked from a job. He hadn't had a worldwide reputation, unlike today, and he didn't really have any family to lose or friends too. So then he decided to go. Someone suggested to him, you should write a pamphlet about it. I mean, I would if I could, but I have a reputation to lose. I could lose my reputation. I could also lose my family. I could also lose my stuff. I could lose everything that I have. But you don't really have that much stuff. You just lost your job anyway. So this is a good opportunity. And this is why Thomas Paine started writing it. Mainly because of his own interests, but also because of his friend. And he didn't really have that many risks to take. And if you ever study the American Revolution, you'll always have to read this as a source. Because this is one of the sparks that this was one of the fuel to the fire of the American Revolution. Now let's talk about its effects. Other than that, it just helped start the American Revolution, it also started making people be more active and more unsilent, unlike some of them, that is. Common sense literally just expressed in a very, very powerful way of what the common people of Americans of back then in 1776, in the 18th century, were feeling. And once the British knew about this, they could do a lot of punishments to Paine, But I'm pretty sure the only thing he was able to get is jail, but I don't think he really got jail. He doesn't have a reputation, he didn't really do, he doesn't have a job, at least not during the time. He doesn't have some family, so they can't do that. The only thing they could do is just put him in jail, and that would outrage the people, which is always a bad idea. Thomas Paine is just plain great. I have no idea why there is a lot of things that's going to happen in Common Sense. I mean, Thomas Paine took a big leap into writing this. But still, it is one of the most widely read pamphlets of all time. So what do you say? If you really want to learn the American Revolution, read this. That's my recommendation. The effect on the revolution itself is also probably the actual fuel for the revolution too. During the American Revolution, many soldiers and many other civilians started reading it. Like, yeah, it's pretty good. I agree. You know what? Let's fight and go volunteer and become a Minuteman. So, if Thomas Paine was alive today, what would you tell him? Well, if he did, he'd be at least 200. He'd be at least, I don't know, 150 years old. So that's kind of a failure, and no one has already lived that long, and no one's even lived 200 years old. So I'm not even sure if that's possible. But if he was alive, I would tell him 3 words. Good job, Paine. Okay, by the way, there was on this footnotes during the introduction, it said that a pain in the ass. Was it in the 18th century? And then no, it was actually more commonly widespread during the 20th century. The last century, the 1900s, guys. Thomas Paine really did do a good job. He expressed the struggles of many people during that time for Americans and how everyone was doing back then. Common senses also have thought to be the most powerfully and passionately expressed the views of many of the ordinary Americans during the 18th century. And that's a huge accomplishment. I think this should at least win a Pulitzer Prize or something. I mean, definitely not a Nobel Medal since it's just for children. This is not for children, so that's why it wasn't given a Nobel Medal. But of course, if Thomas Paine was alive, then I'd say he should at least get a book award. So, what do you guys think about Common Sense? I recommend the book itself. It's short, the Bantam version, including the introduction and references, is just 79 pages long, so it's about 80 pages long. It's not that long, so it won't take a lot of your time to read. In fact, it took me less than an hour to read. So, hope to see you guys in the next episode. Until then, Sean out. Peace.